Okay, if we're live, can I start now? You guys can put a thumbs up or something in the chat if I can start. Okay, so very good evening to everyone present here who's watching us on YouTube also. I'm Aakriti Shankar. I'm the current president for DepSoc of SMVIT, and today I will be taking the brainstorming session on criminal justice system. So I will be sharing this, and this content has been provided by some of our seniors. So thank you so much for this. With that, I will just a quick confirmation. Is the screen visible? Is the screen is visible, right? Okay. So starting off with criminal justice system, let's understand certain key facts about what the criminal justice system is and why criminal justice system becomes so important when it comes to debate motions. So first, let's understand what is a crime. So, by definition status, an act is a crime is basically an act that is prohibited by the law, and it inflicts harm on to another individual or group of individuals in a society. So, technically speaking, societal perspective wise, crime is something that is not allowed, which is why you have systems like the criminal justice system that take care of the crime. Because what happens is that the criminal justice system combines private institutes and government institutes, and one major fact is that they have to prevent crimes and also punish the criminals, so that there is a thing that the act of right and wrong is clearly visible, and people should not commit the same mistakes or crimes again. So that is technically what a criminal justice system does in brief. But further down the slide, we will be understanding what exactly happens here and what happens in such motions. So now that we've understood what a crime is, there are two important branches of crime that we need to understand. First is that for something to be even considered a crime, you must have two components present in your crime. One is that it should be either a guilty act, sorry, not either, it should be a guilty act in a guilty mind. What I mean by this is when you say a guilty act or act to say, it means you're committing a crime. It's the act of committing a crime. When you speak of guilty mind or men's day, it is the intent to commit a crime. So there's certain times where we see certain situations where you have committed a crime. So say, for example, like we have few examples stated here, you've accidentally bumped into someone and they fell down the stairs and they broke their arm. So technically speaking, it is not fair for the state to punish you because you had no intent to commit the crime. It just happened, right? So for a crime to be considered a crime, you need to have the guilty act aspect of it present and the guilty mind aspect of it present. Okay, so now when we come to a criminal justice system, it is a set of legal and social institutions for enforcing the criminal law in accordance with a defined set of procedural rules and limitations, right? So now let's understand one thing about the criminal justice system is that it works on facts and figures, right? So there's no generalization until you have actually proven me that, oh, statistical studies show this or surveys show this, whatever. We need facts and figures for a criminal justice system motion. Second thing is that a criminal justice system, like I'd explained to you before, works on preventing crimes and punishing criminals. So here the whole utilitarian concept is kind of not functional because majority of the population may even say that, oh, it's just a one time thing, let it slip and everything, but that is not how it works, right? If you let it slip once, it may slip again and everything. So you need to take a neutral stance over here and tell me what is right and what is wrong, right? And everyone, it's not known to us that, it's a common fact that everyone is equal in front of the eyes of law, which is why you have the statue of the lady with the weighing balance and her eyes covered with the blindfold, because that just signifies that everyone is equal, and we're not seeing anything, we're giving them equal weightage on grounds without having a bias already. So, justice, you have to understand, when we talk about criminal justice system, it is also important to understand that justice is only delivered when asked for, because it reaches in such a place at sometimes that people feel so uncomfortable in their own skin. And at the end of the day, every state has promised that they will protect their citizens under the law. So when a person seeks for justice now, it is because they have been pushed to that limit that they're feeling uncomfortable, right? So a means of serving justice for them is now bringing them back to the comfort level that they had before the certain incident. So these are certain points that have to be kept in mind when you read the motion and you understand why criminal justice system becomes important. Now, there are different types of crimes that occur. So we learned that for a crime to be considered a crime, you need to have a guilty mind and a guilty act, correct? But not all crimes are the same. There are crimes that occur on different degrees and different levels. So, a basic background on when you consider something a crime now based on the guilty act and the guilty mind, you need to also look into certain things of what a crime depends on. So, it is degree of crime, it is the background of crime, it is the intentions and the circumstances of the crime. Okay, let's understand why all these factors are critical to us, and we will now also understand why and how to deal with them one at a time. Okay, so now when we talk about degree of crime, in the newspapers, in the media, everywhere, we hear about, okay, you can take for an example, bullying is a crime, rapes are a serious crime, stabbing, murders, killing, all of them are different degrees of crime. There can be different intentions as to why a crime has occurred. So, if I have, for an example, take a case of someone murdering person A, murdering person B. Now, this is a certain degree of crime, and probably the intentions of person A was to take revenge on person B because they have probably some decision of person B has affected person A so much that they sought out for revenge, right? So in such cases, understanding all this background of the crime, the intentions of the crime, circumstances of the crime, everything becomes critical importance as to now to see whether person A murdering person B was just revenge also, or it can certain times be considered as a self-defense when understood person A's case very, very well. Because initially it may sound like a murder case, but what if person A was just trying to defend themselves and accidentally have now stabbed person B, which now makes it a murder case. So these terms become critical to define it. Now, criminal justice system has been existed in countries for a very long time, especially in our country, India. It's been there from 1600s, and it's evolved also, right? It's not the same criminal justice system we knew from before. It's now evolved. So certain practices like gay marriages, sati system, all of them had a way of dealing with them beforehand. But now, as you can see, we've progressed. So has the methodology, or I can say procedure of them has developed, evolved, or these practices have been banned or accepted with certain rules and regulations being followed, right? So now when we come to four main goals that you can see over here on the system, when we say criminal justice system, these become four important pillars of criminal justice system. And the key for all debates now becomes is that you have a good case and a very strong point to now tackle down your opponent when you bring up these four pillars, right? They're interconnected, and any change in all these in any policy affects four of these in different ways, right? So now when people are even considering the changes, like I mentioned, the system has evolved and everything, you have to consider the significant impacts they will have now on these four goals, right? So let's understand these four goals one at a time. So now coming to retribution, there is a saying that an eye for an eye or tit for tat, right? So basically, retribution is punishment. All actions must have consequences, right? So, like we mentioned, that there is a degree of crime. So, the sentences passed should inflict a degree of suffering on the criminal, right? So, there can be restriction of freedom of movement, there can be financial punishment, and in reserved cases, like for the most heinous crimes you can think of, such as rape and stuff, I will also want to issue a trigger warning. I know that it's not very ideal to discuss such cases out loud, but general trigger warning. So, in such cases, whipping that is seen by say officers in charge or anything, those that can also be done as a means of punishment, right? So now you have to understand that when we say a punishment is being given, we cannot, the degree of the punishment also differs with the degree of crime, right? So it has to be proportional. You cannot give an unfair punishment to petty theft. Say if a person has just stolen something like an apple or something from the market, I can't issue them a death penalty or something, right? But if there is a case where a heinous crime is being committed, I can't just let them off very easily also, right? So it's a equal amount. If the degree of crime is serious, the punishment will be serious, so it's a proportional way. Okay, so why must there be this proportion of the degree of crime and degree of punishment? So there is something called as over punishment and under punishment. So in the cases of the example given below, if you give a over punishment, it destroys the soul of the criminal, right? And if you under punish them, then they will think that, you know, we can repeat it again or something. And sometimes when under punishment also takes place, the victims feel that enough justice has not been given to them, which is why then the victim takes it in their hand to receive justice on their own, and that becomes a slightly more complicated case. And then that can also lead to the victim being punished also, because they've decided to take their matters into their own hands without, when it is shown that in the system accordingly they've received justice, right? Now, let's understand one more crucial fact. There is something called as the social contract theory. So, this is also one of the important pillars that we will now study about in criminal justice system. Is that you have, give me a minute, sorry. Right. So now you have to understand that at the end of the day, when these criminals are receiving punishment for their crimes and justice is being provided, at the end of the day, once they serve their time of punishment or whatever, they will be coming back to the society, correct? So what you have to do is now, even when you are giving them a punishment, you have to ensure somewhere or the other that if they re-enter back into the society, they have to, we all understand that certain societies have a different mindset, where once if someone has done something like a crime or something, they will now be considered as criminals, and no matter what that person does or says, the term, the tag of criminal will always be attached with them, right? So that is also one reason why over punishment cannot be given, because then what will happen is that the whole process, the re-entering process of the criminal back into the society after he served his statement, or how many ever years it was, they will find it so hard to fit back in. And then the whole process of their living will be hindered, and they will face so many challenges that they will not understand as to how to overcome them, right? So your when you come to social contract theory, your state is only justified to restrict your rights to a certain degree. Okay, so criminals that violate the rights of other people give up their rights to the same degree and no more than that. This is something which is called, also comes now in the term of incapitalization, which is another pillar. So what happens is that we all know that, we have been given a certain degree of fundamental rights, fundamental duties, right? And in those rights, all of us are entitled to those rights, but using those rights as a mean to hurt the other is something that is not acceptable, right? So generally, when people consider retribution, also it is said that if person A can violate person B's rights, then sometimes those rights should not also be given back to person B when he says, "Oh, it is my freedom right though." So retribution is one important pillar that basically serves for an eye for an eye, but there are lots of points that have to be considered along with it, right? So now, when we come to retribution, we have to understand why it is a necessary part of central our criminal justice system. So there is basically when you now give a punishment, right? People will understand that such kind of acts are not acceptable. So this will also help you engage the public in understanding that if you do something wrong and if it has hurt someone, then there will be some amount of punishment that is coming. So when you're violating someone else's rights, that is not acceptable, so there will be some amount of punishment that is given to you. So it will dissuade the people from engaging in such criminal behavior. Then there is victim closure. So for people who have been victims of a crime, they they want to know exactly what, it's not normal for a person to just experience some crime happening against them, correct? So victims generally would want to know as to what has happened to them, or why is it that they had to even face through such situations, and what consequences now is their attacker facing, or the person who's committed the crime is now facing, right? So our criminal justice system provides that victim the closure that, we've understood your case, we understand you want justice, we are providing you the justice by giving them the punishment for the crime that they have committed. And it also maintains the integrity of a system. So if there are no harsh consequences to committing crime, society loses faith in your criminal justice system. And they're basically not, if you don't have faith in something, then you will not work with that system also. So you need, for your better functioning and good working of your country, you need the people and the citizens to have faith in your system. So for victim closure, providing the idea that, if you do something which is considered a crime, there will be consequences. And for victim closure, criminal justice system and especially retribution becomes a critical part of it. Moving on, we have rehabilitation. So, like I said before, once a criminal has finished their statement of how many years or served their sentence, there is generally the thing that they re-enter back the society, considering that considering on the promise that the criminal has now changed for a better look or like a better mindset and will not commit this crime again. So basically, this is also one way of, avoiding this kind of a system is aimed to avoid having the crimes done again, because there is a general belief that once a person has been punished for something that they've done, the person would not engage in such kind of situations again because they know the consequences of it. So that way rehabilitation also becomes critical when we say that now if a person has served their sentence, they will be re-entering back society to hopefully better themselves and their statement. So now basically rehabilitation also helps us in understanding the root causes of the crime and seeking to overcome them. Now, normally, a lot of the crimes that we see, like when I mention terms of background of the crime and intentions or circumstances of the crime, not all people are criminals. Sometimes the situations force them to act upon and commit something which is a crime, right? So now, when we see common roots of the crime, we can understand that poverty, lack of education skills, lack of welfare, effect of people, so negative peer pressure, gangs, lack of moral upbringing, childhood trauma. These are certain key aspects that can be seen when majority of the criminal cases are now brought in front of the judges for people to receive their sentences. And what happens is that now, when we talk about rehabilitation, it's one model that we propose that will help to now rectify these problems and basically try to curb the problem of the crime at the root, because now we understand that when the crime was committed, it was committed due to this being the root cause problem. And now, when we are asking that person to re-enter the society and to avoid such kind of consequences again, they will now work on the root of the problem itself. And that is also why we see it as a positive and forward bringing aspect in our society. So now there are re-education and programs. Sorry, vocation programs. So prisoners are enrolled into a program of their choice to learn marketable skills they can use to seek or retain employment outside prison. So some of the skills that are taught to them include horticulture, carpentry, painting, plumbing, masonry, welding. So while we are asking them to re-enter society, there are also programs that are now helping them do so. When, if we're talking about, say, financial aspects that were the root cause of the crime, then we are trying to help them gain the skills that they need to now get to a place where that financial aspect can be tackled down and they can help better their situation. So rehabilitation also is critical here, and such programs are cost effective. Normally, what happens is that when we're saying cost effective, what happens is they ask for the prisoners or you can say charitable donations or whatever, to invest in such systems for ensuring such systems for the criminals itself. So we have people introduce competitions over there or promote these kind of activities in the prison and then go out and sell them in the market and then give back the prisoners how much they've earned from that market or whatever, so that cost of living is maintained and their work is being recognized and they are able to somehow integrate everything back. So initially, participation rates were not high, and many people did not register, and some people still choose to not register. But now we can see that it is critical. So now we have to understand that even as a root cause of the crime problems that we've encountered, one of them is childhood trauma or general trauma, which is why that crime was committed. So now, when you are looking into cases that have trauma connected with them, you have to understand that help is also available for trauma related cases. So psychologists and therapists are working with these criminals to talk through their issues and resolve them. And there's a different branch of psychology also that deals with this. So the psychologists themselves are trained to deal with criminals and how likely they're supposed to think and everything. So generally, if no resolution is achieved, research shows that the forming of social relationships and opening up to another person had an positive impact on their mental being. So again, as a positive outlook, if it works, it works. And there are also support groups that we know about, like in general there are support groups for people who want to quit smoking or quit alcohol. So such kind of facilities are also now organized for these criminals, where they can meet up in schedules and support each other, and that will also have a positive impact on them, and they will again work for their betterment and their better future. So there are religious organizations also that come in, as some of the prisoners work for the better when they have a belief in religion, when they find a belonging of themselves in religion. So here religious institutions like churches and their communities, in gurudwaras and their communities and other religion communities, become support for them, and that belief of God also helps them now become better. So basically, like we mentioned, rehabilitation is reintegration into society. So you need, like, certain of the points that we mentioned is that they need an employment to survive, or they need a financial means to survive. But now, because they are criminals according to society, and even though they served their sentence, there is still that stigma and that tag attached to them that, oh, they're criminals. So sometimes what happens is that this reintegration into society becomes so difficult for them just because of this one tag of criminal being attached to their names. So what happens is that now the stigma continues to persist. They will be discriminated against in their society, and what will happen is, because of this discrimination, they will tend to be isolated, and this isolation may also push them back to committing crimes, and will hinder the whole process. So now in reintegration, we have some post prison support services, that are your housing services, legal services, employment services, and everything. And you have programs like Care After Prison, where a national peer-led criminal justice charity supports people affected by imprisonment, current and former offenders, and their families. So there are equal amount of systems being placed to help the criminals in re-entering the society in such a way to avoid all these negative factors. Now we come to deterrence. So it is this incentive for people who may have committed crimes but choose to not, for fear of the consequences. So let's understand that when we now talk about criminal justice system, and we understand that people should have faith in the system, we also need to understand that we have to maintain this kind of fear in them, right? We cannot have our society or our citizens or our public believing that for any crime they commit, they will be let off. There has to be certain fear in them that for every crime they commit, there will be a severe consequence or a punishment equivalent to that, right? So this is instilling a fear in such a way that they do not even think about committing a crime. So basically, what is it that there is a general deterrence, that is the threat of legal consequences of committing crime on the general public, and there is something called as specific deterrence, that is the threat of legal consequences of committing crime on ex-convicts and individuals who have been through the system prior, right? So basically, what happens is situations like this kind of become difficult to prove also, and the fact is that most criminals do not expect to get caught, right? They commit the crime, they flee the scene. It's They have this thinking that, okay, you know what, we're not going to probably get caught. But that is something that cannot be allowed in a system, which is why when we say we need this fear to exist, the best way is to probably have, say, rules and regulations, and follow those rules and regulations with like a proper enforcement of them, right? Some strict and consistent enforcement of such rules and regulations, so that this whole idea only does not enter that, oh, we're not going to get caught, or oh, let's commit a crime and walk away with it. I'm sorry, give me a minute. Okay, so now we have to understand protection. So the criminal justice system cannot be just reactive to crimes that have already been committed, but must also be proactive to prevent future crimes from happening. Now, it's not unknown to us that there are cases that are pending in the system, right? So while you are also dealing with these crimes and while you're handling the previous cases that are there, you also have to ensure that such things do not happen in the future. So when you have terms like your deterrence, rehabilitation, and incarceration, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. What you're trying to do is now you're trying to have that kind of a fear set in the people's mind that crimes will not just be left as it is, and that there will be consequences. And that is one way of ensuring that such crimes do not happen again or do not happen in the future. So now you come to process of justice. So even when arrested and accused of crimes, criminals do have access to few basic rights. So some of these rights are the right to a fair trial, due process, to seek redress or a legal remedy, rights of participation in civil society and politics, such as freedom of association, right to assemble, right to petition, right to self defense, and right to vote. These rights are given to a criminal without fail, right? So if a criminal fails to receive such rights, then that can also be brought up in front of the law when they can say that we failed to receive these rights. And that process will then change a bit when we now understand that if they are being denied of these rights, then there is a certain trial and process that does count this, and it just doesn't go unnoticed. It is taken into account. So there is something called as the presumption of innocence. So the courts are bound by the maxim innocent until proven guilty. Like we mentioned before, it works on facts and figures. So you need to prove it to us through facts and figures. Until then, the criminal is considered innocent. So what happens when you follow such statements that such as innocent until proven guilty, you're protecting the accused from okay, let me rephrase this. So, when we say protects the accused from having to prove their innocence, the burden of proof is always on the prosecution. So, we have to understand that when a person is trying to now say that, um, say person A is guilty of such crime, the prosecution now has to prove as to why they're saying this statement, right? So the kind of burden for the person to prove that they're innocent is always there, and the burden falls more on the prosecution to prove as to why they feel the person A is guilty. And in such cases, your accused can choose to remain silent and not testify to, incriminate themselves. So now, when it comes to prosecution and the prosecutors, they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of the accused before they are sentenced. So, what is generally said that it is morally better to let 100 guilty men walk free than to unfairly punish one innocent man. So here, majorly, the burden falls on the prosecution and the prosecutors to actually prove now with proper facts and proper figures why person A is considered guilty, right? Because at the end of the day, the state promises the citizens that they will protect them against the law. So unfairly punishing a person is considered invalid or not allowed also. Now, what happens is that we've understood what a crime is, we've understood what a crime depends on, we've understood four important factors which base our theory of crime. But now we have to understand certain aggravating and mitigating factors. So it is normally known that whatever the judges decide or whatever is given as the final decision by the jury cannot be changed, right? So let's understand certain cases and certain factors that are now having enough power to change such decisions, right? So, after the court has determined a defendant's guilt, the punishment or sentence must be determined by the court. So, aggravating and mitigating factors are circumstances unique to a crime that could extend or reduce the severity of the sentence of an offender. So, some of the common aggravating factors are that it's a repeat offender, vulnerability of the victim, leadership role, hate crime. Repeat offender is someone who's committed the crime time and again. Vulnerability of the victim is, say, if the person accused right now and is considered now guilty as proven by the prosecution is, say, a mother of a minority class and she has children, and now because of them being from a minority class, the children will now face issues, be it financial wise, social acceptance wise, and they'll also be considered orphans if the case is given of a death penalty and something. So in such cases, the background of the individual comes into picture. And leadership roles are important because majority of the time, some not even majority, in some cases it is seen that the leaders of certain communities are the one who commit the crime. So the effect of the leaders imprisonment on that community can also either increase crime from that community, or like we mentioned, that fear of having a crime and committing a crime and getting punishment for those crimes can also help curb the crime rates in that community. So leadership role, hate crime, repeat offender, vulnerability of victim are some of the common factors. Now, some of the mitigating factors are that if they're a first time offender, if they have a minor role in the offense, if they have past circumstances of example trauma, if they have mental illness, or they have genuine remorse. So this is where something known as your plea bargain comes into picture. So a plea bargain comes into the picture now when the accused pleads guilty, as in they tell the court, they tell the judge that yes, I am guilty, and they work with the system. And in by working with the system, they're able to now negotiate a deal with the system in such a way that it often lessens their sentence because they themselves are accepting that yes, we have committed this crime. Normally, for first time offenders and minor roles in an offense, there is a reduced punishment statement or no punished statement, because at that time they are, if they have a minor role in the offense, then the people who are considered to have the major role in the offense, they get the punishment. So the person who's had a minor role is now able to see the consequence of the act, and now they will think twice before they commit that crime again, or they commit a crime in general. And like mentioned before, there have been cases of mental illnesses or trauma that affect a person, and sometimes even in certain of these situations become a fight or flight effect also. And as a means of self-defense, now when you do something, it accidentally becomes into a crime. So considering all that factor in the background of crime also, these are certain mitigating factors that occur. Right. So now, considering all of this, we come to a final thing of drawbacks, right? So now we know that there are certain drawbacks in systems also, right? Because it's very what can we say? We've experienced situations where there is a positive impact also, and there can also be a negative impact where that fear is not prominent enough and people continue to commit crimes, right? So one major drawback is that there are lots of pending cases that are still present in the criminal justice system as of today. So it so happens that because of the large number of pending cases, victims who are actually seeking for justice are now not getting that justice, or still haven't gotten it. So they're now losing faith in the criminal justice system, which is one factor that we clearly mentioned before. And we said we need that kind of fear to be there. We need our victims to get justice. We need to show that when you commit a crime, there is a severe consequence, and no crime is left unturned, or turned a blind eye to. Then there is lots of cases of corruption that also exist, and in certain cases the terms of race, gender also kind of not only race and gender do have certain stigmas attached to them. So often those stigmas are able to impact the mindset of the people, and that is why some of the decisions taken may be very unfair because of these stigmas that already exist. And pretty much then justice kind of becomes unfair to whoever is given, or it is not the justice that they wanted or asked for, right? So this has been our cases on criminal justice system so far, and if we do have any questions, I'll be taking it later in the Google Meet. So thank you very much.